This myth that the cartels can operate in the US exactly the same way as they can in Mexico. They can't, right? The US, for all that we might be concerned, is not as corrupt. There's not the same mechanisms for cartels to penetrate law enforcement and state in the US as they have in Mexico. That's not going to happen. But what industries do they understand outside drug trafficking? They understand cattle very, very well. They understand agriculture very, very well. They understand import and export very, very well. So those are the industries in which you would expect to see them set up permanent shell companies, permanent front companies.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Welcome to Borderland, Narcosis, an Ironclad original, presented by First Form. Don't forget to pick up some of your First Form supplements at firstform.com/Borderland. One of my favorite things to do before and after I do these shows is a protein bar. They're easy. They taste great. You guys go check them out. Our next guest is Chris Dalby. You guys know who he is, an incredible journalist from the founder of the World of Crime. He is coming to us today to talk to us a little bit more about TDA and other things such as Trump's tariffs. I think you'll enjoy it. Chris, thank you so much for joining us again. Obviously, this is a little different. This is Narcosis. We focus a lot more on the cartel, the drugs, the gangs. And so I thought it'd be fitting to have you back so we can talk about some things.
Hey, I appreciate that. And you're talking about my favorite subject, so let's go.
Well, here's the first thing. The media is talking a lot about Trump's tariffs. And you wrote an article that says Shadow Economics, how President Trump's tariffs empower organized crime. I thought the idea was fascinating, and I'd love to kind of dig into that. If you can help the audience better understand why you believe that his tariffs is going to potentially help organized crime.
Of course. You know, it's a cliche, but it's an accurate one to compare organized crime to legitimate corporations. Because even though they operate outside the realm of legality, they are affected by the same things, the law of supply and demand. How easy is it to move a product? How do you price it? How do you get it to market? It is exactly the same concerns. Now, tariffs affect legitimate businesses, as we well know, even though the fallout of President Trump's tariff plans are not fully clear at this time. President Trump can raise tariffs on China, lower them on Canada, based on the interactions that he gets with those nations. He can't do that with a cartel, who I promise you are already calculating and already operating on what opportunities do these tariffs open up. And that's not just at the Mexico-US border. It's a knock-on effect from Canada, from China, from Europe. What opportunities are being created? What goods are going to be more difficult for illicit business to supply? And what new smuggling opportunities are going to arise? For example, there's a massive trade war with China. The tariffs against China are probably the highest of any that the government has lobbied. Against Mexico, they're up and down. That is going to naturally create more legitimate commerce opportunities between China and Mexico. If tariffs between Mexico and the US are lower, goods from China are going to come into Mexico, get moved as being a Mexican product, and then moved into the US. It's not difficult to see that being replicated for the fentanyl industry, for example, right? We know for a fact that since 2019, when China cracked down on fentanyl, more and more of the production was happening in Mexico, right? They moved to selling precursors and then pre-precursors. What we're going to see is another shift. What we're going to see is another shift where different parts of the fentanyl supply chain might move from China to Mexico to avoid those tariffs. Similarly, at the border now with Mexico and the US, you're going to have a lot more attention being placed on cargo inspection, a lot more attention being placed on trucks moving goods. Okay, that causes a problem for the cartels because trucks are an easy way to smuggle things into the US. They will absolutely shift to passenger vehicles. They will absolutely shift to moving through Canada, which they already are to a certain extent, and what you're already seeing a little bit, moving to asking illegal migrants to, force them to move drugs across the border as well. Then if the tariffs stay in place for any length of time, what I expect you'll begin to find is a rise in drug mules at airports, drug mules at ports, right? Smaller quantities, but spread out across a larger moving population.
Yeah, that's interesting to think. So essentially what you're saying is like if they're making it difficult to pass one way, they're just going to start finding alternate routes. I think that might be happening now, because of there's such a blockage currently right now on the border where the number of people who are coming across, which then I would say that means that drugs would be lower as well. But I haven't seen any repercussions yet, or I haven't seen any kind of, signs of stress from the cartels. So then that makes me believe that they're already using alternative ways of getting drugs in the country that we haven't necessarily slowed them down yet.
Of course. There's always a shock effect, right? If you look at COVID, when all trade stopped during the early days of COVID, there was an impact on the cartels, a negative impact for them, right? Where they were not able to move fentanyl, they were not able to move cocaine, even within cities, right? Local drug sales were impacted.